and we have not been doing a good job. And I think just to acknowledge the really important preservation work that the Aboriginal traditional custodians have done just really highlights the importance of this session even more. So my name is Sarah Grace, and I am co-presenting with Sarah Rickard, who, for me, she looks like she's on my right, somewhere else on your screens. So we'll just do a little quick introduction about ourselves. I am an Inner West local. I've lived in Yarraville for about 6 years. And I got involved in the Sharing Shed about 18 months ago, and mostly because I'd like to think of myself as a goodish person when it comes to trying to reduce waste. And I say goodish because if I'm good, it means that I don't have anything else to improve on, but I'm goodish because I'm always looking to improve on things. And I think that the Sharing Shed is an excellent model for being able to reduce waste. And so we're really excited to present this to you in just a moment. And Sarah Rickard, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi all. I'm also here in the Inner West, and I guess I describe myself as I like to describe myself as a frugal hedonist. I take joy in living simply and trying to reduce my impact on our planet Earth as much as possible, and also tackling the climate and ecological emergency. And I do like to try and assist other people on that journey as well. And that's how I came to get involved with the Sharing Shed.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. So I'm going to now try and share my screen, and I will just let you know this is my first time doing this, so if you can just bear with any technical difficulties that I might experience along the way, that would be very much appreciated. So let's see. There we go. So that's Sarah and Sarah there. So what we're going to cover in this session is what's the problem with waste. We'll go through different models, the linear, circular and sharing economy models. Then we'll give you an insight into what is the Sharing Shed and how you can be a part of it, and also what are the community benefits to having a Sharing Shed, and also how does that benefit the environment as well. So I'm going to try and do my first ever Zoom poll, just as a way to make sure that you're all paying attention. So I'm going to pop up a really quick poll just to get you all thinking. And the question is, on average, how many hours do you think a power drill is used in the average household per year? So is it 8 hours? Is it 12 hours, 3 hours, or 20 hours? It's got a few responses coming in there. A few more answers up. Okay. No one thinks it's 20 hours so far. How are we going? Okay, we'll end it there. So we had 4 people say 8 hours, 3 people say 12 hours, and 11 people say 3 hours. If I just said that right. So really great that I think majority of you can acknowledge that things perhaps are underutilised. A lot of us would have something like a power drill in our house, but only getting 3 hours of use per year really highlights that a lot of these things that we have in our homes are really underutilised. So I'm going to close that now. And that was just to get you starting to think, and we'll kind of come back to the importance of that when we talk more about the Sharing Shed. So what is the problem with waste? I think this image kind of is something that we've probably all seen before, a landfill site with things that basically get thrown out, but they don't have anywhere to go and they end up sitting in landfill. We see that landfill sites are producing huge amounts of greenhouse gases, and as a result, we're in this climate and ecological emergency state. Landfill is one of the biggest contributors to greenhouse gases. And more than that, I think the focus that we've had on convenience over sustainability has meant that we're pulling so many resources from our environment to make and create new things that then have a short life. And I mean, you just have to think about a plastic bag, which has an average use time of 12 minutes and then gets thrown away. And the resources that go into creating that for something to just be thrown away really does impact on our environment in a really negative way. More than that, it's the transportation of things as well, which is contributing to the emissions, and essentially we are ruining our water and soil health and our biodiversity. And so while this is just an image of a landfill site, it is much, much bigger than that. Jump over to you, Sarah.
So much of the Western world, we've come to live in a culture of endless consumption, and the global economy we seem to be tied to is driven by a quest for profit, using up our natural resources, these resources that give us fresh water, healthy soils, and the air that we breathe. We operate today mainly in this linear system, which starts with extracting the resources and then ends with waste. But it is physically impossible to have infinite growth on a finite planet. So our throwaway society is based on a demand for fast food and fashion, the latest technology and upgrades, comfort and convenience, and is all driving a throwaway culture where objects are easily purchased, they're easily sent to us, more easily discarded when we have no more use for it or it breaks. And it's usually cheaper or easier to replace than repair. Sorry. We've lost the sense of ownership and value for the things that we have and use, and also for the skills and knowledge to fix and maintain. We need to rethink the system, and as we witness the effects of the climate and ecological emergency, we need to do this before it's too late. So whilst we have a lot of work to do, the positive is that we have the answers. We just need to make it happen. Whilst we can look at either end of the linear system, better ways to manage the resources and better ways to deal with the waste, we're always going to end up with problems with restrictions on these, such as downcycling things into less durable, valuable products, and also having a fewer demand for raw finite materials. So a circular economy, we can close this loop and we can move and make our system move in a circle. We can make use of the waste as a resource, significantly reducing waste that goes to landfill, or better still, stopping it all together. And this also removes the need to deal with any waste, and it limits our inputs to renewable and recycled materials. The circular economy entails decoupling economic activity from the consumption of finite resources, designing waste and pollution out of the system, and keeping materials in use and regenerating natural ecosystems. Through this system, we can build social and economic and ecological capital. In a sharing economy, items and services are shared, as are the costs to set up, to use and to maintain these items and services. So a sharing economy can be used for commercial or public purposes, such we know through ride shares and self-service laundries and so forth. They could be non-for-profit, such as tool libraries, or they could be community-based amongst friends, family or neighbours, such as you see with a Let's group or a food swap. The collaborative economy is another way to describe this sort of model. A collaborative economy enables the use of unused and utilised assets to unlock the value of things that we already have, reducing consumption and environmental impact through the manufacture and disposal of these items. Sharing and reusing items ensures that they are used more intelligently and frequently and kept longer, such as tools which can be expensive and resource intensive to create. As we saw with the power drill getting used for only 3 hours per year per household, as part of a collaborative economy, it could be used for 20 hours per year or more. So in our digital age, with content going online, libraries are considering ways to remain viable and looking beyond borrowing just books. Communities have taken this challenge on themselves as well, and many people have launched different ways to share, such as street libraries, seed libraries, and catering supplies amongst existing networks. Online, we know there's lots of ways to share, swap, and gift. We've probably all heard of Free Cycle or Share Waste or the Good Karma networks and so on. But with these, there tends to be a limit on what gets shared, and this is usually due to a lack of trust from not personally knowing the other people, the complexities of connecting and exchanging these items, especially in the current environment with COVID, and also knowing what items are available, or there's a limited number of items available and so on. So a sharing shed overcomes this and many other issues by copying the library or the shop model. It has a central and a physical location. It provides a range of items in good condition. It's open at dedicated times, providing staff or volunteers, providing affordable costs or options for people, and also operating under legal requirements. Sharing sheds, they're popping up all over the globe, including the successful sharing shed in Brisbane, and there's another one in the Blue Mountains. There's lots of libraries for more specific things, including in Melbourne, the Brunswick Tool Library, some of you may have heard of, toy libraries in some council areas, and there's even a library of cake tins in Kensington. Some of these tool libraries are now expanding their inventory beyond tools because the demand and interest in the ability to share grows.
So, who is Sharing Shed Melbourne? We are a pretty small group at the moment because we haven't been able to officially launch and open our doors to start the borrowing. But this is a group of some of our people. We're always looking for more people. There's Sarah Rick and there's I at a moving day earlier this year. And I'm sure now after what Sarah has presented to you, you're feeling really convinced that Melbourne needs a sharing shed, and it's something that you would want to be a part of as well. But what really is it about? Well, our motto is Sharing Shed Melbourne, own less, live more. So we really are trying to make things affordable so that people can access a wider range of things, and especially those infrequently used items, so that rather than needing to pop out to the Aldi special buys sale every time it's on for some camping gear or fishing gear or whatever it might be, we will be a library of things, and that's what people can access. Things like hobbies gear, stuff for cooking, you know, gardening tools, camping gear, all craft. And I think that really we're only limited by what we can perhaps fit in the space, and as we open our doors and start to grow, we'll really be able to meet demand of people, so be guided by what our members want. So really, when we think about that sharing shed model, how does that help us to address climate change? Sorry, please bear with me because I'm just trying to get my notes up on this other computer off to the side. I guess it's really about reducing the demand for the stuff. So like the Aldi special buys example, if we all go and buy those things, then there are so many more resources required, and therefore that's a lot more waste at the end of the day. So we will be able to reduce that demand for raw materials and maintain our natural systems. Therefore, that also reduces the need to manufacture, to package things up, to transport them. And will also reduce our individual emissions and our environmental impact. So by having useful items for community members to be able to borrow, then we have less waste going to landfill. We'll be able to get more use and more value out of what we already have. And it's been amazing that so many of the items that we have ready to be borrowed have been donations, because ultimately people have found things that are underutilised within their own homes, and they want to be able to increase the use of those by other people as well. It will ultimately reduce our combined emissions and deliver a bigger impact as well. And how will this benefit the community? Well, I think if I think about how I would like to be able to access the sharing shed, it really provides an opportunity to try before I buy. And I think that's a really big attractor for people. Why invest money in buying tools that, you know, or hobby items that you don't know that you're actually going to actually enjoy and want to use long term. Also will provide an opportunity for people to reduce the clutter within their homes. We're living in smaller spaces and there never just seems to be enough room. So being able to have access to borrow items means that they're not taking up space in your house that the whole time. It also becomes a financial saving, where if you have affordable access to borrow items, you don't have to buy everything yourself. Providing an opportunity for people to learn new skills and also learn from each other too. And that is one of the aims of the sharing shed, is that we will actually be able to share skills between our members and teaching how things operate. And ultimately it's about building community and connections and social inclusion. So people will be able to come together, and I mean, the fact that you're all here today for this webinar shows that you have some similar ideals, and that's what we really hope to build more through the sharing shed, by having that physical space when we can one day meet in person again. So what I would love, what we would love is that if you are interested in finding out more about the sharing shed, please follow us along on social media or on Instagram and Facebook. Sign up for our newsletter to stay up to date. If you're really interested, we are always looking for more volunteers. And so if it's something that you feel like you could commit to, we meet every Wednesday night on Zoom for an hour, just to keep ticking along things that we need to get done before we open our doors. And we're also having our AGM on the 26th of August, again online, but a really great opportunity for you to hear about our year in review and what we have planned. And I'll just leave it on this really awesome cartoon that Sarah found. And, you know, this really to me highlights that we've done some terrible things in the past, and we really have been destroying this amazing land that we live on. And we can be part of the solution to building this new community and this new incredible place where we can be sustainable and we can value our resources. So that's it. Did I miss anything, Sarah? Are there last final words that you might like to add to my rambling?
No, I think it was well said. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. And if there, I've seen the chat box going a little bit, so if there's questions that people want to throw out now. I'll just stop that share, but we can answer them now, or Danielle, if you prefer at the end, we can answer them.
So there are a couple of questions there that specifically would probably be good to just get to now. So it's, do you have any ties to mending and fixing groups or communities?
Great question. We are very fortunate that we're looking at setting up shop in Ascot Vale, and there is a repair cafe there. And I can see now that I'm stopped sharing screen that Michelle is here, and Michelle, who's founded Repair Cafe Melbourne. And so that is actually another key pillar, is that repair is going to be a big focus for the sharing shed, because if we can repair things and keep them in operation, then again, that goes to reducing waste and increasing the use of items. So yes, we have some ties with the Moonee Valley Repair Cafe, I think it is, there in Ascot Vale, but we would also be seeking volunteers that could repair specifically for the sharing shed as well.
And trying to connect to any other organisations that wish to do this, such as earlier this year we participated in an event at Dwell in Ascot Vale with Moonee Valley Sustainability, and we ran a little bunting making session along with boomerang bags, boomerang bag Valley, I think they're called, and
just lost your...
Are we still here?
You right, Danielle?
Yes, I'm all right. Sorry, I think it might have been, I couldn't hear you. I thought it was your internet connection, but it might have been mine. Sorry, apologies. Yeah. There's another question is, how did you collaborate with the new COVID restrictions?
Well, it's very interesting that it just felt like we were getting the momentum going, and we committed to meeting weekly, and we were meeting in person weekly. And in a way, because we haven't opened our doors and we haven't launched yet, it still provided us an opportunity to still meet online every week, and we have a standing meeting time, and whoever can make it can come then. It's actually been amazing at keeping things ticking along, but we're really hopeful that at some point, perhaps later this year or early next year, we will be able to actually open our doors and do the physical borrowing as well.
I guess I have also seen that other sheds and libraries of things online, they've worked out ways to operate in the COVID restrictions. I think some toy libraries as well. So there are people who are operating that have worked out how to do this. So yeah, have a look.
Yeah. I'm just conscious of time. I know there's another couple of questions there, but I'm wondering if we should head to Elena and then come back to those questions, if that's okay with everyone. If you're ready to present, Elena.
Yep, I'll just get all my buttons sorted and see how I share screen. Okay. Okay, everyone can see that okay? Great. Okay, thanks very much for having me along. It's a very important topic. So this is me, and this is my aspiration for my front yard, for my front garden. And this is my aspiration for my nature strip. And down in the bottom corner, you can kind of see more like where I'm at with it. So you can see my aspirations and my capacity are not always in alignment, shall we say. And this is what I would like my garden boxes to look like. And more often than not, they look like more the background image. And this is kind of where I feel maybe my brain and my composting is at the moment. And my worms are actually doing okay. And look how pretty they are. This is what my houseplants look like though. And I'm sure many of you, like me, I think probably the two Sarahs are more on top of this stuff than maybe I am, but I try and do all the right things with recycling and soft plastics and composting and working out what to do with toothpaste. And I try and go to farmers markets and do all those good things. But there's a lot of kind of individualized pressure, I guess, to achieve all these things. And I am passionate about climate change and housing and sustainability and cycling, which means I'm on any number of working groups and that sort of stuff. And then you constantly get bombarded with this sort of thing about achieving the ultimate balance and somehow also having time for meditation. And I'm sure that you are all very similar, or you probably wouldn't be here on a Saturday. So what does this have to do with co-housing, and maybe what is co-housing? I don't know if many people, I can't see many people on the screen, so I don't know how confused or otherwise you all look. But co-housing started sort of in the 70s around Denmark and the Netherlands, and at a similar time where women were being encouraged into the workforce, which is obviously really good and positive. But at the same time, I think we made a mistake. We should have made the men stay home more, and we didn't really do that. And so, and also divorce became legal in many places. And so we ended up with a lot of kind of single mums and also working mums. And in Denmark, they decided to start to live closer together so that they could share more of those caring roles, share more of the kind of domestic economics sort of processes. And now at the moment, we've seen kind of many iterations of how co-housing has emerged in different places. And right at the moment, the big pressures are definitely around housing affordability, loneliness and isolation, and kind of care and concern for the planet. But at this point in time, this is what we're still creating, kind of lots and lots of suburbia and some kind of really high density in the inner city, but not a lot of scale that allows us to meet and connect and share things and have friendly, accessible communities. And there's lots of stuff happening around kind of placemaking and aspirations for participatory design and budgeting, and often discussions around things like the 20-minute neighborhood, where everything should be accessible within kind of walking or cycling distance, I suppose. But more often than not, suburbia is sort of at a scale that doesn't provide the density to support lots of those functions happening in a commercial way, which is sort of how society is currently built and dependent upon. But what can we do about it? Co-housing is about kind of coming together and creating a vision for what you want to achieve, designing it together, building it together, and possibly most importantly, having a kind of co-governance model where you are kind of autonomous and self-determining about achieving all of your goals and aspirations. So lots of people get quite worried that it's some kind of massive share house on steroids, and that you don't have your own private space. you do have your own private space with all of the regular things that you kind of imagine would be in your house. It could be though that it's just a little bit smaller because you have these other spaces that you get to share that kind of augment that space. So some of the things are a common house, which is kind of one of the most central things to co-housing, where people come together to share meals and other activities. And then really beyond that, it's sort of up to each group to decide what works for them. This is a project in the UK, and I don't know if you, can you see my cursor if I move around? They have a common house here, and these are all of their private dwellings. Some of the things that they share is this shared car parking and bicycle storage. They obviously have this huge kind of natural pond in the middle. And this space up here is a community garden, which these people all use, but also the broader community also uses it as well. And guest bedrooms is another thing that's often shared, so that people don't have to have that spare room for grandma or kids or anything, that just ends up being kind of the laundry / junk room. And there are design elements that are usually employed in order to ensure that people regularly bump together and have that spontaneous connection to each other. And when you cultivate this kind of built environment and all intentionally, it's possible then to have shared meals. This is an image from Murundaka, which is in Heidelberg Heights. You can have walking school buses, you can have informal childcare, and you can have the whole community helping in the garden, and your garden aspirations not ending up like mine. And you can also have opportunities for kind of co-care and looking after the older residents. You can get the kids engaged in slave labour for you. You can have nice people who know how to fix bikes help you out. You can have young people who know how to use computers help you out. And you can have older people mentoring younger people, so they're not just completely dependent on their parents, I guess, and parents don't have to do everything. There's lots of opportunities to kind of create affordability through sharing. This project at the top is called Ouch. It's older women in co-housing, and they were determined not to go into kind of nursing homes and to provide care to each other for as long as possible. And this is Lilac. That's the image of the previous example that was shown in plan. And you can also create systems around how you organise tenancy and ownership in order to share some of those financial considerations as well. And you get economies of scale because your dwellings can be smaller, but you still have all the amenity that you want provided through the shared space. So these are a couple of quick examples. This is Iwan in the Netherlands, and the things that they share, not just with each other, but also with the broader community, is a co-op shop, which is down in this building here. And the people who live here can access it all the time. They have a key, they can just go in, and it's just, you just sort of write down what it is that you took and how much you owe. And then they open it to the public a couple of times during the week and all day Saturday, I think. And they also share their common house amongst themselves, but also allow it to be hired by the broader neighbourhood. This is Lilac again. This is just a picture of their community garden space. This is Clough Jordan in Ireland, and they are an eco village, but they're still based actually right in the centre of town, and they have actually heaps of space. So they have a farm and they have training, but they also have a cafe and other facilities that people can use. This is a co-housing project in Wolverton in Belgium, and as part of their entry, which is sort of down through here, they have a neighbourhood laundry. So they all share a laundry facility, which is quite common, so that not each individual household needs to have their own washing machine. But they've also made theirs accessible to the public as well. So people can come in and they don't have to do it in their own property, and because they noticed that there weren't really facilities in the general area. So that was something they could easily provide to their broader community. This is a project in the middle of Brussels. As you can see from the outside, it looks like a very respectable apartment project. Doesn't look like a bunch of hippies or anything at all. And they've got a huge amount of space on their ground floor, which is a combination of their common house and other facilities that they want to share, but it's also designed so that it can be hired out as co-working space and meeting rooms and things like that. And there are projects emerging like Nightingale, which maybe people have heard about, which are definitely doing a lot of good things in terms of ESD, sustainable design, and they're good value for money if you compare what you get with how much you have to spend. But they're still quite expensive, and they don't have the same level of kind of community intentionality that I think is desirable if we want to start creating these shared spaces for use beyond the immediate co-housing group or apartment project, for example. And one of the things that's really important for that to be achieved is some kind of group process and shared governance model. And that's a central component of co-housing. It's also quite a central component, I guess, of many organisations and groups that come together, like the Sharing Shed, where you have people passionate, but it's important to establish what your objectives are and what you want to achieve. And so there's a lot of work that goes into ensuring you have good group process, consensus decision making, and different types of governance. And then these are some of the key sort of processes and policies that you should have: a vision statement, a joining process, policies, decision making, communication, and conflict resolution. Some people, I suppose, feel that this all starts to look very scary and arduous, but I think we have to remember that the alternative is that we simply pay other people to do stuff for us, or we buy stuff so that we don't have to share. And we're quickly working out that that's not, it's not only environmentally unsustainable, I think it highlights that that sense of isolation and loneliness is also a manifestation of us not often coming together in order to do these sorts of things collectively. And we need to relearn a whole bunch of these skills if we're going to, I think, both connect with each other a lot more and a lot better, and if we're going to be able to share more resources and live more sustainably on the planet. And I think that's it. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you, Elena. So now we'll go to some questions. If anyone has any questions, there are a couple that were in there from the Sharing Shed presentation. So someone has asked about hooking into the local men's community shed and whether you're aware of any examples of this. Sharing Shed? Pereyra.
Sarah, you might have more knowledge about if there are other examples of this, but I think that if there is the interest in men's shed members, it's a fantastic model, because often they do repairs already, and they come together and they have that community already there. So it could be a really great way to start a sharing shed. Do you know of any examples, Sarah?
No, I don't, but maybe if Michelle is still there, we could ask her to jump in. Michelle and Elena actually did the very early stages of Sharing Shed, looking into how to get something happening at all, and did a lot of research around Sharing Shed. Michelle, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the men's shed sometimes actually does intersect both with Sharing Shed and repair cafes. But the thing with the men's shed is it's a program for men's mental health, so it often has a very different goal than a community one. So different men's sheds have different approaches. Some are much more open to community use of the facilities, and it would make an ideal sort of partnership. But other ones are much more focused on connecting the guys, if you know what I mean. So it just really depends on the particular men's shed involved. I don't know if David Painter over in the Gold Coast, he just set up a tool library and repair cafe, and he's been collaborating with a bunch of groups. But collaborating across as many of your local areas as possible is really ideal, whether it's going to be your community garden, your men's sheds, your repair cafes, your local schools. So yeah, because everyone has that sort of interest in either being a user of the tools or a contributor of the skills, or even things like the Scouts. The Scouts, you know, we were at a community pitch and they were looking for tents to get funding to buy tents that they would use once or twice a year. So there's a natural, you know, connection that you could use a sharing shed to do that. So we can actually save money as a community in sharing more. So yeah, I've really encouraged collaboration wherever you can. I think we did touch in the Moonee Valley research when the council was looking into the viability of the project. We talked to the men's shed, so they talked to the men's shed, but it wasn't a real fit at the time.
So, sorry, I can't hear you, Danielle, you're on mute.
Thank you, Michelle, for jumping in there. So we have a question from Isabel as well. Where have you sourced the shared items from? Do you rely solely on donations?
At the moment, we have a lot of donations that have been made and some that are waiting to be made. We've also sourced some saved from going to landfill from collections from councils, but we also know that there are a couple of high demand items that people are going to want, and we'll have a look into ways to source these, whether it's to source a second-hand good condition or whether we need to buy something new that's going to bring value to the sharing shed. But yeah, mostly donated at this time.
Thank you. And Sarah has, I think this question is for you, Elena. What level of support is there from government or developers to consider co-housing within policy and development in a capitalist society?
At this point, very little. I think that's just because housing doesn't get a lot of sort of consideration just more broadly, and from a political perspective, it's very much their biggest voting block is obviously still private homeowners, and now slowly emerging, obviously slightly more rights for renters, but we still have a very long way to go. And co-housing is, for that reason, very much a grassroots sort of initiative at this stage. It gets a lot more support internationally. But we as an organisation also work really hard to try and get it into local planning schemes and make sure town planners and other people that you have to work with are at least aware of it, and you don't have to spend 20 minutes explaining it to them at the beginning of every meeting. But there's obviously kind of growing demand for alternatives to housing, because it's just becoming more and more, the normal speculative market is just becoming more and more inaccessible. And so people are looking at alternative ways to have secure and affordable housing.
So Elena has asked how you suggest going about setting up a co-housing development. I think that is, do you get some friends together and buy some property?
Yeah, I mean, you can start by either a group of friends who you already know are kind of aligned to the idea, and then going out and having public meetings, and then usually meetings similar to starting things like a sharing shed. You work through what your objectives are and your design brief and where you want to be and what's important to all of you. But it's typically a good scale for co-housing is in the vicinity of 25 to 35 households. So unless you've got that many friends who are already kind of really on board with the idea at the same time in the same place, you're going to need to go out and kind of work and look for other people who are also similarly minded. And the reason that that number is a kind of good scale is that it's not so small that any one person or couple of people is left with the bulk of the work to be done. It's also not so big that you lose connection on a kind of interpersonal level with everybody in the group. And it means that you can do stuff sustainably within the community, but also with beyond the specifics of the co-housing group to host things and run things with the broader neighbourhood, which I think is ideal.
Thank you. So there's a comment there from Christy. I'm not sure if Christy is interested in asking a question around that. She's just said that she's interested in the combo of co-housing and cooperatives. Did you want to say anything about that, Christy, or?
Hello, yes, I'm sorry, I'm just wrangling my small person. I've been looking in, and I wondered when I saw the information about what today was about I've been looking into cooperative models, which I guess I haven't read lots about where it feels like co-housing and housing cooperatives sit quite separately, but I'm kind of interested in whether anyone has any information about ways when those two things have kind of combined, particularly if you're looking at trying to specifically, I guess, look at housing affordability for people who might be in, more kind of financially challenging scenarios, and also, like, I've been kind of looking into where there are kind of state funded opportunities to be looking at affordable housing. I just know some friends in Hepburn have neighbours who, received a grant to build affordable housing and rent it out, and I'm kind of, I'm just wondering, I know there isn't heaps of support for co-housing through state government, but I just wonder whether there's any loopholes that people are exploring in this group.
Yeah. So co-housing is more focused on the kind of participation and engagement processes. So people coming together to design together, build together, and then kind of live collaboratively together. The mechanism that you use for people purchasing or renting or being involved in the project is really separate to that. And so co-housing can be strata title with an owner's corp, and it can be a cooperative, and it can be shared equity and mixed equity and any number of other possible combinations, depending on what it is that you want to achieve. So Murundaka, which is in Heidelberg Heights, that's entirely a cooperative, and it's owned and managed by Common Equity Housing, which is a community housing provider. So the people who live there are on a limited income. And then there are other projects like Urban Coop, which are a co-housing group that's going into the Nightingale Village. They are all completely self-funded, so no affordable housing at all. And there's a project in Dalesford getting started, which is a combination of private people purchasing, and they're also working with the Women's Property Initiative, a community housing provider who specifically help women who are over 50, I think, and have insecure housing. And so they will have some community housing, cooperative housing within that co-housing project. So I hope that helps answer that question. There's a number of ways to do it. And
yeah,
you look for
right.
partnerships that are going to work to help facilitate the kind of people that you have involved. But I think what is important is that many groups do want to be intergenerational and have a diverse socioeconomic spread. And that means that you do need to find external agencies to support the process, because individuals can't really, they can hardly fund their own house, let alone also trying to facilitate a whole bunch of affordable housing as well. So one of the things that we're definitely working on is how to bring those partnerships together more easily.
So we have a couple of comments, questions around COVID. Karen has asked whether it's difficult to sell co-housing in COVID times. Yeah, and Michelle has just commented that we've seen the risks with the towers and the communal living and public housing, and asked how co-housing initiatives in Australia are faring with COVID. Yeah, so if you were able to speak to that a little.
Yeah, I think many co-housing groups are actually kind of ahead of the game in COVID times, because they already had established kind of a trust network, and many people, I suppose, who just live in kind of normal suburbia suddenly now can't rely on grandparents or friends that they used to have to travel long distances to see. They're now suddenly trying to get in touch with their neighbours and support older people who live in their community. Whereas for co-housing groups, you already know exactly what people kind of might be needing or might be lacking. And so that network is already well established. And then you just do all the standard things that you're required to do: social distancing, wearing masks, or working out strategies for managing those communal spaces. And from the scale of the public housing, I suppose, where, yeah, you don't necessarily have that huge population, and so And because you're self-managing, then you can coordinate with each other to establish safe processes, and those just don't exist already within those public housing towers, or even just regular big apartment projects, which means you need the concierge or management or someone else to come in and tell you what to do, or else no one really knows what's happening, I guess. And then we get to the point that we got to with the towers.
So we've just got a couple of comments there about how lovely it would be to actually be in a co-housing situation at the moment and be able to socially engage with people and get support, as you've indicated. Is there any other questions anyone has that anyone would like to ask of either the sharing shed or of Elena?
Could I just ask the panel, I'd be really interested in your thoughts about government support and wider community support and need for both initiatives in times when employment is so precarious, and people just don't have money coming in, and we can't, clearly from what we hear from the federal government, rely on them forever for a payment. Do you see that impacting the growth of co-housing or sharing sheds?
I would love to say yes, Michelle, but unfortunately, and that was kind of to my question before to Elena, is operating in a capitalist society, we are very individual driven, and unfortunately there isn't enough government support at any level for sharing and working together and trying to really support people in what might be the most economically viable way, which could be through co-housing and sharing shed models. And I feel like I always hold out hope, and then big change doesn't happen quickly, and this is going to be big change, and it's going to take something massive, like perhaps COVID is something that kicks people into thinking differently, but it doesn't seem to matter who the government is or at what level of government. We just don't see big change. So I don't
disagree though. I mean, look, we now have homeless people living in hotels. I mean, that just never would have happened. That's a big change.
I can acknowledge that, but that is one local government area in Melbourne, and not all of them are operating in that way. And that's temporary as well. So I'm a bit, I just want to be more hopeful, but I don't think it's going to happen. And also, you know, private companies who are developing land, they are very focused on for companies, and therefore their models for developing is very individual home ownership kind of models. So it would be great to see a developer who actually wants to introduce something like co-housing. I don't know.
There is opportunity. I mean, there's the massive defence site in Maribyrnong, which is huge. I mean, if you set up some co-housing, and they're already open to affordable housing, and have a sharing shed on site, and I mean, there's potential, particularly in greenfields, brownfield sites. So yeah, I haven't given up hope yet.
I think I'll jump in here. I think this is where I think I'd like to speak up about getting engaged with contacting your local council, state or federal, local politicians, because letting them know that you want them to support these things makes a big difference. The Moonee Valley Council have been very supportive of the share shed and remain so during COVID, and want to do as much as they can to help, not just with the grant that we've been fortunate to get from them, but also with helping us to set up a physical location, because their council actually declared to support a sharing shed in the municipality, and they know that this is one of the steps to building community acting on the climate emergency and addressing sustainability. So they want to support it, but because of all their restrictions and everything like that, we just need to push them a bit harder as community members.
I would also say that we're coming up to local council elections as well, and we can advocate, but we can also become the people who are in council and making decisions. So go run for council, and perhaps you could make a change that way as well.
So Maylee has asked a couple of questions there, and she's asking how the sharing shed started, whether it started with a grant, council grant or support from neighbour housing. And also just asked on that issue of do we need to advocate local councils to ensure a percentage of new developments to social housing?
Yeah, like Sarah just said, the Moonee Valley Council has been incredibly supportive, and after having a councillor raise a notice of motion that they wanted to see, a sharing shed in the city of Moonee Valley, they did also then support us financially. And I know Michelle, who was really trying to drive the sharing shed in early days, had a lot of closed doors from other local governments in the inner west, and so it's been a very different experience with Moonee Valley, who, like Sarah said, are really pushing this to happen. They really want to get it up and running, and offering a physical space as well, which just couldn't get anywhere else. So they have been amazing.
And I don't know if you want to speak to the second question there, Elena, about advocating to local councils to ensure a percentage of new developments to social housing, or co-housing, I guess, as well.
Yeah, no problem. There's something called inclusionary zoning, which is mandated in other places, but in Victoria it's optional, which obviously means that's a pretty big loophole for councils to just step well away from. Inclusionary zoning is where you specify that 5, 10, 20% of any new development has to be social or affordable housing, and that means that the developers know really clearly upfront exactly what their obligations are, and they just build it into their finance model, and that helps them work out exactly what they pay for the land. Unfortunately, we need to ensure that that happens at a local government level, but also at a state level, and that the state actually just mandates that to councils across the board. And then that way, either it will be provided by those developers, or they'll be able to pay money to the council into a kind of contribution kitty that then the council can allocate to community housing providers, co-housing providers, whomever they see operating in their local area that can deliver housing. And I think it's really important that we also push community housing or social housing to make sure that it's also delivering on environmental sustainability and social outcomes, because more often than not, the money is very hard to come by. And so all of those other things get left off because they just push to get as much housing as possible, which is obviously very important. But then there's also this flow on of a whole bunch of higher utility costs, less cohesion, less of that informal mutual support and engagement that is not accounted for in that upfront kind of financial modelling. So we have to make sure that we look at housing really holistically.
Karen, do you have a question?
My apologies, I'm just saying goodbye.
Oh, okay. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us.
And it's been very interesting. Thank you so much for sharing. It's good to see you all. We'll be seeing you around. Bye.
Take care.
So I'm conscious of time. Does anyone have any other questions or I think we'll wrap it up. I'd like to say thank you on behalf of Cororoit Creek Neighbourhood House and Brimbank Climate Action to our 3 speakers today. It was a really, really interesting discussion. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing ideas and your knowledge with us.